efficient when it comes to data storage. And this is important for data centers, etc. So probably at a more individual consumer level, this does not matter as much. But when it comes to bigger companies that are data center providers or companies that have a lot of in-house data storage facility, costs keep like growing with respect to storage. So I'm talking about the back end of cloud, the infrastructure of cloud, right? Like which is really hard. So yeah, that's essentially what I am building. We're very close to doing a POC demonstration by the end of the year. I'm based out of Bangalore, and yeah, that's a little bit about me. Yeah, I think it would be better if you guys could just jump in and ask questions because then I know what you want to know at this. I'm not, I can just make sure that I'm saying things that are relevant to you. Yeah.
Thanks, Anagha. So any questions from the audience, or I can probably facilitate a few questions. Garv,
I had one
yeah,
question.
Ankit.
Like,
Yes.
yeah, hello Anagha. So I had one question for you. So just wanted to know what inspired you
I'm
to
wondering
decide.
if you can switch on videos. Like, I mean, I also know that I did not switch on videos in a lot of sessions, but like, now because I'm on the other end, I get to ask you to switch on questions, switch on
Okay.
videos. Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
please. Okay.
I'm in the library. I don't know if I'll be able to do it right now.
No, no, please go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, my question was like, what inspired you to do this? And like, since you told you have a POC coming up, I was wondering like if there are startups that take up like they start off and then after that they go into developing the product in more detail later. As in
Uh,
your idea seems pretty complicated and like
okay, 1 minute. Your first question is what inspired me to start, and I don't think I get your second question.
no, like you were saying you have a POC upcoming, right? So I meant like if you can start up and then get your product properly delivered later.
So you're asking if like you're asking whether you need to have a full-fledged product before
Yes,
starting a
yes,
startup. Is that your question?
yes.
Okay, so the answer to that is no. I mean, actually, the answer to that is it depends on what you're building. So when it comes to what I'm building is fairly like capital expenditure intensive. Like you need a decent amount of R&D. And when I say R&D, I don't mean basic sciences research, right? I mean R&D in terms of engineering, like how do you get this to work as a system, right? Like I'm talking about that kind of R&D. So in these kinds of cases, so that's, I mean, in the sort of startup world, people refer to this as a deep tech company, right? Like I know that it's probably too blanket a word to use, but let's just use that word for the sake of like differentiating it from consumer from like D2C brands or like from B2B SaaS, right? So the idea is that when you're a software company, the capital expenditure required to build a product is significantly lower than what it would be for a hardware company because you actually need to procure hardware, you need to set up a space to like work out the hardware, build out the POC, or like then go to prototype, then go to testing, whatever technical milestones and business milestones you have, right? So the answer is that it like so if you're having a software product, then you probably need an MVP before setting up a company or like going out to raise money because people expect you to have these things in place. But when it comes to a more hardware, deeper technical company, people understand that I as an individual don't have the kind of capital that's needed to do this, but which also means that the point at which this gets built, the kind of like unfair advantage that you have in the startup space is significantly high, which means that the overarching returns to the investor over an 8 to 10 year period is going to be significantly higher than what it would be for a software company. So so then at that point you can go out and raise money in order to do POCs and so on. So yeah, that's the long answer to that question. Now in terms of the first question, what inspired me to start? uh, See, again, I think the word inspiration is a little tricky because it's more like it's more like I wanted to work on DNA data storage. I was figuring out what's the best way to do it. Uh, I did chemistry at Bets Goa. Wanted to do a PhD for a really long time. Then spent some time at an academic lab doing some work. Figured out that I didn't want to operate in that setting, but I still wanted to go ahead and build this tech. So then the alternative came down to, can you build a company around this? Can you build a commercial use case around it, and then sort of raise capital to do that, because capital is the bottleneck to be able to do this. And even in a PhD setting, the kind of capital you would have access to is significantly lower. So that's why I decided to start a company around this. And why DNA data storage? I think it's very cool, first of all. Second of all, like I feel like the world, or the market really needs something like this at this point, because our data storage needs are increasing exponentially. And so maybe if 10 years ago someone wanted to build this, perhaps that was not the best time to build this. But today I think it's feasible to build it, and people would want it if I built it. So I think that was the tipping point.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Anyone else has any questions?
Hello, Anagha. Am I audible?
Yeah, hi, Saket.
Hello. So, from a student's point of view, I know BITS doesn't have an attendance policy, but I remember you used to go to every
And we know
classes.
how true that is.
Yeah, but you used to go to like most of the classes and all. So, how is the managing your other commitments affect your building startup commitment? Because right now one major problem I'm facing is that if I invest 8 to 9 hours on ideation and validation for my startup which I'm trying to build, completely miss out on my acads and then some other commitments I do have, like SOPs and also basically, like you know what SOPs and all that, right? So like I'm working with two professors in fact, and that gets significantly hampered. So like what is the
What
ideal
branch are you
balance?
in?
I'm in CS, but
Like a single degree CS.
yeah, single degree CS.
Okay.
So like roughly I have 7 courses a semester.
Hmm.
One is an SOP, so
And
six
and what year
courses.
are you in?
I'm in third year right now.
Okay.
So this is my final academic semester
Hmm.
technically. So
Oh, you're graduating early.
no, but like 4-1 is light, right? You don't have courses
Haha,
as
fair.
much.
But like,
So
okay,
that's
so okay, you're saying CDCs end this year. Fair,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So what is
Hmm.
the way out to this? Like I know it's a pretty vague and general question, but this is a genuine problem I'm facing right now.
Ah, I mean, it is a genuine problem. Like, I wouldn't discount this as a problem, right? Like, uh,
Because this puts me at a significant advantage, disadvantage actually, because someone who is not a student can invest their entire day into this, but I genuinely cannot invest my entire day into this.
I mean, I would still argue, like I would actually flip this and argue that it is easier for you to build this when you're on campus than when you're doing this full time. Um, like the reason for arguing that is because so now I live on my own. I need to take care of my house. I need to clean my house. I need to cook food for myself. I need to, make sure that stuff is in place. Then I need to, and obviously, like being an adult in the world, right? Like you have your own bank account, you have this and that, you have that documentation, this documentation stuff happening. So, you never have time. Like, that's the thing, right? Like you being see, I understand that when you're so the reason why I say this is because when you're on campus, food is not a problem. Cleaning of rooms is like you cannot clean it also. uh like you don't have to, as in to a large extent, like you have like
Yes,
others.
yes.
So most fundamental things are in place. Like you have a place to live in, like you don't have to worry about landlord, rent, xyz things. You don't have to worry about food. You don't have to worry about, like, like you don't have to worry about living expense, right? Like your fees has been paid for, all of those things. So at that point, then like those things don't exist. Now the only thing that exists is acads and like projects and like maybe clubs, right? Like whatever. Now out of these things, so like okay. So now the thing is, you could like it's not like, oh, I have to give 8 hours a day to do this, right? Like that's not a like I don't think you should set like a daily time requirement for things. So maybe on some days you have some intense acads work, so you don't work on your company, but you like compensate for that by like doing stuff over the weekends or like doing whatever, right? So it's more like what needs to be done and like how much time does that need. It's not like, oh, I need to set aside 8 hours. You set aside 8 hours and nothing gets done, then that's irrelevant. Like, so it's more like what needs, like, okay, out of the time that I, out of the thing. So, okay, if you don't mind, have you decided what you're building?
I have 2 3 ideas, but there's a problem with that as well. I'll ask you later, but
Okay,
let's.
fine. No, so okay, let's assume that you're building something like biocompute, right? Like because I can't think of any other example. So then you say, okay, I need to show that data can be stored in DNA. What is the first step, right? Like what do I need to do? So in your head, when you're thinking about like now I'll probably have a more detailed answer, but when you first start thinking about it, you're like, okay, I need to figure out tech, I need to figure out market. So now there are two sets of activities you need to do. One is figure out how you can access the lab infrastructure to do the stuff that you want. The other part is figuring out like talking to people in the data world, right? Like these are two broad things that you first need to do to like determine if you want to do this. So then you say, okay, now I'll speak to X number of people this week, or I'll try to speak to these people. I'll reach out. And I don't know, at the end of the, like, at least the way I operate, and from a lot of founders I know operate, we are sort of always thinking about our company slash company to be project at the back of our minds all the time. So, like, I'm sitting in the mess eating, I'll be like, oh, I need to reach out to XYZ, and I'll just like reach out to them, right? Like, so it's more like, is this running at the back of your mind? And are you like doing these things? Like, because if you think of this as an additional project, then probably it becomes really hard to put in the time. But it's more like, oh, this is something I'm obsessed about. So I think obsessing about it is the way to like find the time to do it. I'm not sure. Again, like the question is itself very open ended. So I think I've said a lot of things around it. You can, pick out whatever is most relevant to you.
Yeah, yeah, got it. Thank you.
Hi, Anagha. I'm Achutan, and I wanted to ask you, like, how did you get started? Like, exactly once you got the idea, what exactly did you do to start? Who did you work with? And did you have any co-founders or like, did you have any friends at college that helped you with this?
How did you get started once you had an idea? So I think so. I got my idea way before Sus Ventures. In fact, I actually, convinced these people that they should let me work on my idea because they had a bunch of problem statements that they had put out, and I was like, "See, I already have an idea," and these folks are very accommodating, which is very good. But so what had happened was I got the idea when I was doing my thesis in so I was doing my thesis in IISER Bhopal in 4-1. And that's when I thought of the idea and I was like, okay, I need to validate this. And in my head, at least at that time, I was like, I need to technically validate it first. Like, I need to run some experiments. So I tried to figure out if I could work at a lab at IISER or a lab at BITS to do this. Then I figured out that if I had to do that, I had to go through their incubators. And going to the incubator meant giving up equity very early on. Very unfortunately, I mean, I believe that BITS incubators need to do better with equity, but that's a whole different rant. But so I said, okay, academic labs not happening. Now, how do I do this outside of an academic setting? For a while, I played around with the idea of setting up like a lab in my hostel room. Uh, and then I figured out that it would be hard to like move stuff out later because I'd already reached my final year. So if I'd gotten the idea when I was in my third year, I would have built it out of my hostel room. But like so I was like, okay, fine. I'll find like an incubator, like a bio incubator outside. So that's how I ended up exploring a bunch of these places. A few in Bangalore, a few in Hyderabad. Went and visited those places, looked at how it works. Uh, because I knew I would graduate at the end of like 4-2, right? So by that time, I was like, okay, I'll have everything in place and then move. Because I was like, these are the experiments I need to do to validate this. And so then I ultimately landed on C Camp in Bangalore and decided to do C Camp. C Camp is an incubator, like it doesn't matter. So then I said, okay, this is what I need to do. Now, when I came into the Sus Ventures course, something that I had not spent a lot of time doing was market validation. So that's something that Sus Ventures pushed me to do. So, these folks would come in and say, okay, sure, this is cool tech, but like, have you asked people if they want it or not? So that kickstarted the process of reaching out to folks, asking, okay, data, do you have this? Do you have this need? And obviously that was also hard, right? Because again, data storage as an industry is very opaque. You need to find people, get to decision makers. It's taken me a while to even get to decision makers. So obviously it's a slow process because, okay, whatever things you need to do, you can do from your side. But if other people are not responding to you, then you have to follow up. So that adds to delays. So these kind of things happen. So the first thought in my head when after I had an idea was, okay, how do I validate this? Like at least for myself, right? Like I want to see that I'm able to store data in DNA and retrieve it. And obviously, depending on what you're working on, this would vary, right? Like, but I think step one is for you to validate it for yourself. Like you need to be able to see that what I'm thinking of is happening. But if this is something you've worked on before, for example, if this is a project you've done as a part of a club, or like if you worked with a prof on this, then you already to some extent in your head know that this will work. Like, so in those cases, then you can skip that step, right? Then you go on to say, okay, what's the step beyond this? How much capital do I need to like go from X to Y and Y to Z, right? So yeah, so that's kind of the thought process there. And in terms of co-founders, not really, like, is the answer. Tried with one person during the Sus Ventures course, but that didn't really work out. So yeah, solo founding is what I'm doing at this point.
Also, another question I had was your idea about DNA data storage. Few labs in the US are also working on this.
Right.
What sets you apart from them? And like, yeah, what was your thoughts like? I mean, they're also doing it. How do you think you're going to reach the market before them, or like, so like you get my question, right? Like, what sets you apart from them, basically?
Okay. Uh, Again, so what we are doing is, so we have a hypothesis that if we start out with pre-existing DNA and make edits to get to desired sequences, that would be significantly cheaper than synthesizing new DNA every time. So I think that's where, and because there's a cost differential, we believe that we would be able to like get customers to adopt us. I mean, because at the end of the day, customers care about cost, right? Like if someone's selling it at an X cost and you're selling it like at 1/10 that cost, then obviously the customer wants to get you on board. So yeah, that's the more fundamental answer to the question. And yeah, and that's that.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else has any questions? Garv, I know that is Garv on the call. Garv Goyal.
Um, hi, I'm Arud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just missed you on the last part, Anisa.
You had a few questions for
Yeah,
Anagha, right?
right. Yeah. So I was just gonna go follow that. So
I can't hear you very well. Can you speak a little louder?
give me 1 second. Am I better now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. So my name is Garv. I'm from Pilani campus, and it's a pleasure to meet with you. So I think covered the basics of what I was gonna ask. So if you could go more into what's your journey been like into particularly being solo founder. So what I've seen is when you're solo founders, particularly, uh, you've been amazing in raising grants and funding, and also what I've seen sometimes as solo founders is either founders or even grant committees, they're hesitant to fund you a little. They prefer teams like a bigger team, right? So it secures their bet. So what's your journey been through like that? And also, when you started with such ventures, like when you were, I think, as you mentioned, that you were at idea stage, I think, right? What was your TRL back then? What's your TRL been through the journey, especially the deep tech startups? So that will help us understand better the timeline and the advantages you got it and how that increase your TRL. So if you could walk us through the technical journey also a little bit detail, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, sure. So, in terms of solo founder, okay. So, yeah, you're always asked what your team is. So when I say I'm a solo founder, that does not mean like I am doing everything on my own, right? Like I have a full-time team now. We have 4 people, and each of them has a different skill set. So it's more like a solo founder with a strong founding technical team as opposed to co-founders. So I understand that there's a difference, but I think as long as, especially when it comes to grants, and I'm talking about government grants specifically, like other grants all differ across the board. But so people want to see that your team has the kind of technical caliber to get to do stuff that you are claiming you will do, right? So that's what you need at the end of the day. And that's also what co-founders do in a typical startup arrangement, right? Like in a CEO, CTO framework. Uh, yeah, in a CEO CTO framework, also that's the whole point, right? Like someone brings technical expertise, someone brings business expertise. But when you're building a company like Biocompute, you can't operate in a CEO CTO model because the tech itself is so interdisciplinary that you need multiple CTOs, right? Like you need someone from the bio background, you need someone from electronics, you need someone doing computation, you need you need a different set of skills to do these kinds of things. So that is one. And having a strong founding team helps. Secondly, having advisors helps. So you say that, okay, like, we are young, we are doing this for the first time, but we have onboarded this person who gives us technical knowledge, who helps us with the technical problems because they are an expert in this field, right? So having like bringing them on board is very useful. And when I say bringing them on board, I don't mean like straight up handing them equity, right? Like I think that's something that I also figured out along the sus ventures thing, that you start out by engaging with advisors, see how they are working out, and then see how helpful they are and see how supportive they are, and then sort of give them equity later on if needed, as and when the company progresses and if these people need to be more involved, right? Because at this point this is just more like help with troubleshooting, right? Maybe like a few calls a month, like a few texts, like that's the kind of involvement that a lot of my advisors have. So at this stage it doesn't make sense to like give them equity or have formalized things. You obviously have basic NDAs and things like that, but like nothing beyond that. So I think advisors plus strong founding team is how you complement a solo founder. Uh, now, what was your second question? TRL. Okay. Okay, to be very honest, I still don't know how to determine TRL. Okay. Like I know the whole framework and all, but I'm still not able to like figure out where to put my tech at.
Um,
Like,
Maybe let's not just do a number. Just tell us where you were at that time. Explain a little bit more so that we'll understand what's the journey been like, and where were the pain points, or what were the push points?
Okay, so to be very honest, during the Ventures course, I could not do any actual hardware work because I was on campus and there was this whole situation of the lab, if you do something in BITS labs, then they want to take equity, or they want to take IP or whatever weird problems, right? So I didn't want to do stuff in the BITS lab. So a lot of time during the Ventures course was spent figuring out how to do this when I'm doing this full time, right? So figuring out the incubator that I wanted to work out of, looking at like people I could hire, uh, looking at like what reagents you needed to buy, who to buy them from. So a lot of work during the Ventures course was figuring out how to do this stuff, right? So like I actually hadn't done anything during the course. So everything that was done after I moved to Bangalore and like started working out of the lab. Even then there were a lot of issues with respect to supply chain. I had to figure out which vendors to buy stuff from. Certain vendors take a lot more time, then you just like ditch those vendors, go with other vendors. So a lot of time has been spent in figuring that out. Now finally we have managed to figure that out, so we're actually now able to run experiments in the lab. So I think we are somewhere at like TRL 3ish right now. uh and like obviously post the POC, we'll then move to like say a TRL 4 5, then go with a commercial partner and sort of build it out, and then go to 6 7 8, so on. So that's the thought process.
Got it, got it. So, uh, of like during your journey, so I think you particularly must have perfected as you were in an early TRS. So the storytelling or selling the vision, the idea, what could it sell work, right? So if you could get some insights into that, teach some ideas on particularly pitching, so that you use to for grants or either fundraising, and any major pain points or any mistakes that you felt that you did in your journey that you don't want to repeat again. Like I also learned a lot. So like in your personal journey, you must have learned some things that you don't want to repeat again. So if you could share those.
In terms of pitching, see, I think I think there'll be a lot of people who are way better at teaching you how to pitch than me, because I think see, I don't enjoy pitching, to be very honest. Like, but it's a part of the process, so you got to do it. Uh, what helps? See, I think just communicating things clearly helps a lot, right? Like, be very clear, be very concise. This seems very obvious, but if you listen to a lot of pitches, you realize that people are largely beating around the bush or not saying what they need to say, right? You just need to answer like a few basic questions in a pitch, right? One, who are you? Two, what are you doing? Three, why are you doing this? Four, why should the person listening to you care about it? Five, what do you want from the person listening to you? These are the five things that should come out in a pitch. Like, and if this doesn't come out, then you probably being unclear in your pitch. So I think just focusing on like getting these five questions answered is probably the way to give a successful pitch, at least from what I think, from whatever bit of experience I have. But please speak to more experienced folks who come in throughout the course and like ask them how to pitch. uh Now the second, I forgot what your second question was.
So majorly all learnings were mistakes, particularly mistakes that you did, that you realized that we should learn some major learnings that
On
from the
what
cusp part.
one though? Like, I mean, there are so many mistakes and so many different aspects.
Overall, during particularly maybe during team building, during fundraising, during pitching, during basic overall crux of your entrepreneurship, not very deep into Biocompute, but overall some things that you did, particularly maybe choosing the wrong founding team or any stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I think like learning to trust intuition, right? Because a lot of times when you're talking to people, like either for hiring or for partnering or whatever, you'll get like a personal sense of intuition about probably not the right fit, right? But sometimes you'll be like, yeah, but like on paper, this person looks great. They have a good CV. They have like the so-called skills that you need to complement whatever's already there. So you should probably bring them in, etc., etc. But then you end up realizing later that, not working, right? Like, so I think that initial intuitive feeling that you get as a founder about things are usually always right. Like, and I think you should trust that. Like, I think initially I didn't, like, I felt like, okay, I don't know enough. This person looks good on paper. I should probably bring them on board. But then you engage with them for a while and realize that, not working, not a good alignment in terms of work styles, in terms of vision, in terms of personal goals. So, yeah, I think that is one big, and it's probably a very underrated learning, right? Because everyone is constantly like, bro, go out and find like someone with complementary skills, go out and do this and that, right? Like, and I don't think they're factually incorrect statements, right? Obviously that rationally makes sense, but a lot of times I think just trusting your intuition, like means a lot more. There are people that we have not hired in our team. So, for example, we were trying to hire for a role, and I asked the other two people in my team, would you have like dinner with this person on a Saturday evening? And if your answer is no, then we don't hire them, right? Because I mean, not because we go around having dinners every Saturday, but because, like, if you've got to spend a lot of time with someone, and if you don't like them, and when I say don't like, I don't mean from a biased perspective, right? It's not like, oh, I don't like you because you're from Goa or something. Like, that's not the kind of like we are talking about, right? It's more like a personality fit like thing. And that's very important, especially at such an early stage, right? Because the amount of time you have to spend with these people is insane. The amount of communication you need to have with them is insane. And obviously you're also shaped by the people you spend a lot of your time with, so you also want to maximize for finding the best people. So, I mean, obviously technical skills matter, right? I think finding that balance between technical skills and your ability to work with someone is valuable, and I think that's a bunch of mistakes. So I've made some wrong hires, and then obviously figuring out how to fire someone is another headache. So, yeah.
Got it. Thank you so much for sharing. May I know, like, who was your first backer, right? Whether in terms of grant equity or maybe mentorship, and what was the turning point particularly? So what I felt is generally there's some turning point where then everyone starts and come backing you. They're like, oh, you are associated with, like, maybe I am Bangalore now. Okay, come here. So what was that point for you, and how did you get them on board at such an early stage?
Yeah, my first backer was Grad Capital. uh,
Okay, Atomic Fellowship.
yeah, Atomic Fellowship, and then they put in their 40K check
Okay,
as well.
got
uh,
it, got it.
I mean, they are. I think Grad Capital is a very unconventional VC.
I
Uh,
agree.
they have spoiled me insanely, because now, they don't expect you to have a deck and all that. And then everyone else
Hmm.
asks you for a deck. You're like, what the hell? They never asked me for a deck. But does not matter. But so, how did I convince grad? So the thing is, I had interned with Grad Capital for a while in my second year. So I knew Sethi, Abhishek Sethi, who is one of the partners. And I spent a decent amount of time talking to him and like having conversations about, like, this is what I want to do in life, all of these things. And then yeah, I mean, that's when, so I think I already sort of, at least they sort of knew me as a person beforehand, and that helped a lot, because one barrier crossed, right? Because at so early you're betting on a founder more than betting on like what they're actually building. So and obviously, like, Grad Capital folks are also like Betsians. They understand science at a very fundamental level, so you can tell them, this is what I care about. Because the first few times I spoke to Sethi, I was just showing, pulling up research papers and saying this is what it is and this is what that is, and they were chill with it, right? Like, and they actually sat me down and helped me figure out like a business case, like figure out unit economics. So I think there's a lot of hand holding from their end in terms of doing a lot of things because they were very interested in backing what I was doing. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that again, like that also comes with some like, and obviously, I didn't go to intern at Grad Capital with an intent of raising from them later. Like at that time, it was more like, oh, I want to know how the VC world works. So yeah, it just came out very well for me. But I also think that just Bitsian network in general, right? Like, and I know there are folks from outside bits on this call, but like, and obviously I can't speak for you, and you'll have to figure out your equivalent of that. But alumni network, if you know folks, like at least for a pre-seed seed stage, it shouldn't be very hard for you to access capital as a Betsian, provided you're able to communicate your idea well enough and get a few early backers on board. Like a lot of fairly successful entrepreneurs. So, for example, say Pixel founders or your Postman or your whatever. These folks will these folks are usually also angel investors. So you can reach out and say, this is what I want to do. Will you be able to put in a small check? And usually folks are fairly willing to do it. I mean, one, because also it's an ecosystem, but two, because they also care about backing young founders because someone took a bet on them when they started out really young.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for answering. Like others take the question too. Maybe then I'll come back. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Hello, I'm audible.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, hi Anagha. So, my queries, I'm from Pilani campus. My query is that whatever I would say idea we are working on, how much branch relevance would you consider an importance to? I also get it ki if my branch, like suppose if I'm doing some sort of a material research, for example, if I'm working on, let us say, some sort of a alternative plastic which has properties very much like plastic and is greatly recyclable or maybe just biodegradable, just an idea. So firstly, now what hits to my mind is you would need some good chemistry, you would need some good bio knowledge about it. So what if our branch is not really in that direction, but we are passionate about that particular idea? That is one question. And the other is, so when ideas like this, especially the example which I gave, which is not a matter of business initially, but more of the thing that you have to develop that product, because at the end we are betting on having a product which has these qualities like biodegradable and great plastic properties. So is it just about I mean, how passionate you are, or how much practicality should I figure it, like what are the factors I should understand? It is such and such difficult for me to really execute and make such kind of a product. What are the things that I should take into consideration when I bet on something like this? I'll have to put in a lot of years, lot of research, lot of capital, as you said. So what decision making things do I have to consider when into things where I'm making something or innovating something that is probably not in the market yet?
What branch are you in?
I am in ECE, electrical essentially.
Which, I mean, you would still sit in for
ECE
IT
singularity,
jobs,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, maybe electrical, yeah, IT jobs, mostly, yes.
So branch never matters, right?
No, I mean, honestly, currently I am in the direction of electrical. It may switch to IT,
No, no,
that's
no.
a
I'm not
different
saying you
story.
will sit for an IT job. I'm
Yeah,
saying someone in BITS who does an
yeah,
EC or who does a mechanical or who does a chemical, they still sit for IT jobs. Branch never
true,
matters.
true,
So then the answer to
true.
your question is also that branch doesn't matter. Like, uh, the reason why I say that is because okay. Okay, this is probably something that's going to get me into actual trouble. But okay. like see, in terms of things that you learn in your CDCs, etc., right? Wait, am I still audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Because his screen froze, so I was unsure. Yeah. Uh yeah, so okay, so things that people teach you that you learn in your CDCs are probably not like a lot of it is very fundamental principle level knowledge, right? As opposed to more practical knowledge. And this is true across university systems, I think, and obviously depends on the kind of projects you take up and all that. But at a fundamental level, just because I majored in chemistry does not mean that I now have the capability to, do everything in the world in chemistry, right? I still need to figure out how stuff works. I still need to, do things. So like, and probably someone who's in ECE or someone who's in CS can still figure out the same things, because a lot of it is just first principles thinking. So yeah, I mean, that's the answer to should branch
Yeah,
matter.
sure. Cool.
Then the other question was about what should I consider before doing something that's deep tech? If was that your question?
I'll just short it up. So when there are things that involve researching or basically innovating products that probably don't exist in the market, like a material that is having plastic properties and it's biodegradable, so which requires capital and time, what decisions should I like? What factors should I really take into consideration? Because it's a very long journey. It's more like a marathon, as per my understanding, and it's something that should be very carefully decided. On what basis should I decide if I really want to get in that direction?
Oh, I actually don't know. You should probably ask someone who's slightly older, because I also make a lot of decisions based on like intuition. I'm like, yeah, I feel like doing it, I do it. Kind of. I mean, that's how I operate in life also. Like if like I don't actually spend a lot of time saying, actually sitting down weighing pros and cons and saying, should I do this, should I do that? Like again, I have the privilege of doing that. Like so, I acknowledge that. I don't have student loans. I don't have to support my family financially. I don't have to, there's no one else that I need to take care of. So, I can do whatever, however I want. And that's a privilege that I know that a lot of people might not have, right? Because even at BITS, a lot of you have student loans. A lot of you need to, like, give back to your families. Probably you have care responsibilities at home. And that's totally understandable, right? And probably at that level, you cannot go in and randomly do things or like based on intuition. And at that point, probably it's a better thing for you to actually work for a few years, pay off your student loans, save up a little bit of money, and then get started, right? So, like, these are decisions that are very dependent on where you are in life, what kind of privileges you have access to, and like what kind of decisions can you make. But the point at which you have no other like actual baggage in terms of responsibilities, then probably putting in a few years to see whether this will work is not a bad idea. Like in the sense that it gives you exposure, it gives you access, gives you networks. You actually learn tons of things, so it's worth doing regardless of whether your product actually succeeds in the market or not. Because I think because success in the market is also a game of probability, game of chance to a large extent. Even like really good products in the world have probably not succeeded because they came way ahead of their time, or like, and when I say ahead of their time, I mean in terms of market acceptability and nothing else, right? Because obviously if you can build a tech, then it's not ahead of its time, like at a more technical level. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of factors that determine whether your product's going to be successful or not. But then the question is, do you want to spend your time working on it? And does this interest you enough to spend time working on it? And I think that if you don't have any other, like, as I said before, right? If you have the privilege to work on it, I think you should.
Yeah, that really helps. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Devansh, please.
Hi, am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, yes. Hello. Yeah. So I had one very specific question. It's on the lines of POC. You said that you will build a POC now, and the facets behind this, it's a deep tech startup, and it will require a lot of hardware to actually build it and test it. So I'm with a couple of my teammates working on a similar project. Project startup. We are yet to be funded, so I'm calling it a project.
So what are you
So
working on, if you don't mind me
yeah,
asking?
so we are trying to build a dustbin which can segregate waste by itself. So
Okay.
it's one hole and the segregation done. We have figured tech to some extent. So couple of my teammates, they are all both from a technical background. And now where we are getting stuck is how do we actually build a dustbin to show it to the investor or to any potential buyer. And we are having this problem of how do we source the systems which we want or the tech sensors which we require. Uh, what all consideration should we take into building a actual product and all those challenges we are trying to meet people. So I've reached out to a few IoT guys, few sensor guys, and but yeah, everybody is asking us that did you try it, have you actually done it, it sounds really cool, but does it happen, and so on and so forth. And I mean, the tech which we are using is fairly known, but there's some tweaking which we have done into that, and that's why we feel that it's going to be a game changer in this domain. So my question is, how did you or how do you get an investor on board when you don't have this answer as to have you built it actually? So what did you do, or I mean, what market report did you present, or what were your strategies to bring and convince an investor that yeah, you will actually go on and build this, and I mean, there is a good potential in the market. So there is some study which you've already done, but I'll like to know your view as to how did you approach it.
Okay, so the most fundamental thing that you need to show someone is the basic functionality, right? If you're saying you can segregate waste, I'm assuming, there are layers to it, right? Like certain kinds of waste between X and Y, and there'll be like a fundamental separating principle, right? Like there's always a fundamental separating principle. So, and you're obviously operating on that. Now, when you're operating on that, what is the most basic thing you can show someone to convince them that this works, right? So now the question comes down to who are you selling to? Like, is this a consumer device? Is this something that, I don't know, government, municipalities need to adopt? Is this something that like corporations need to adopt? So, and obviously that's also like a trial and error question where you actually go and ask people and figure out. So when you ask them, they'll tell you, okay, if I need to buy this, I need to see XYZ. So then you say, okay, what is this XYZ? Can I show what's the most basic form in which I can show someone that XYZ, right? And then you build just that out, like chuck everything. It looks bad, it looks terrible. You need to hold it from two ends to get it to work, do whatever. But that basic functionality needs to be shown. So in my case, the basic functionality is can I store data? Can I retrieve it without errors? Like
Hmm.
this is what my customers want to see, like at least from an archival storage perspective. So I'm not even telling people I'm solving for speed. I'm saying this is archival storage. So at that point, no one asks you what is your speed of retrieval, does not matter. As long as you're comparable to, existing archival systems, you're good. Now the question is, okay, space, you're saying that DNA will take up lesser space. And that is obvious to them also. They're able to see, okay, fine, it takes less space. Now the question is, if I store something in DNA, can I retrieve it without errors? So without errors is the X that they want. So now my goal is to show them that X. So you will have to figure out what your X is, and then like just show that, and then tell people that, if I get more capital, I can build out Y and Z.
Hmm.
And that's how you go about doing this. So that's essentially what people mean when they're asking you, have you done this? this
Okay.
this is basically, have you found X and have you implemented X? And if
Okay.
you need capital to implement X, then you tell people, I have found that X is what I need. I need this much capital to build X.
Okay.
Like, and you're saying that you've already built out something, so I'm assuming that you have done that
We
as
are
well.
we are we are pretty much clear what we need as our X on. So,
Hmm.
what we are, I mean, there are two areas which are gray areas for us. One is uh, who will be our customer. So we had two propositions because we have not actually built it or we have not actually tested it. So I mean, I'll look to do that in this course where which I have with us, Mafia, and maybe check that out. And the other part is, I mean, we have a conceptual understanding and a basic awareness that, okay, this is what and this is the process in which we'll break down it. But to bring it to a level where, I mean, we can show it is what we are trying to focus on. So one more thing which I'd like to know from you is what are the kind of incubations or incubators should we look to? Because uh, I think college equity funds are topic to discuss, but what can we do? I mean, outside that, or whom should we look forward to? Because so I did my bachelor's, just the background, I did my bachelor's from BITS Pilani, and right now I am doing my master's at IIT. So I have my, I mean, in this colleges, my experiences, there are a lot of people who are there to fund you, but then you have to find out your niche correctly and then, I mean, approach the right people so that you get the good support you need. So, I mean, how did you figure that out, and what are your views on, say, maybe one, two, 3 pointers which you looked after when you were looking for an incubator?
Okay, so the first question is why do you need an incubator, right? So in my case, it was fairly obvious that I need an incubator to access a biolab.
Hmm.
So that already like brought niched it down, right? Like any
Hmm.
incubator that does not have biolab facility is out of my scope. Uh, but honestly, if I did not need access to a lab, I would probably not opt into an incubator. Like,
Okay.
because the point of an incubator is to get you access to infra.
Hmm.
Like, so even if you're building like an electronics thing where you're talking about say sensors, etc., you could just buy sensors off the internet, right? Like, and sensors get delivered to your house, but that's not the case with chemicals. I cannot
Hmm.
sit in my house and order, some random 70% ethanol and all. No one's going to get it to my house. Like, because there are actual regulations around chemicals.
Hmm.
So for me, having an incubator is necessary for me to do that. But if it's not necessary for you and you have like a space, say on campus, maybe your hostel room, right? Or maybe like a small room that you've taken up outside campus, like a 1 BHK or
Hmm.
a 2 BHK, that should be good enough. Like there are a lot of founders who are not incubated anywhere because they don't need an incubation facility. So I think point number one is to determine why are you looking for an incubator. If it's just for the sake of like telling people that you're incubated at like some X or Y or Z place, then that's not necessary.
Our major lookout is we want it for more of a capital support, because if we want to build what we really want to build,
Mm.
and we might incur costs which is a bit too difficult to fund from pockets at this stage.
Right.
So and one thing which we need an incubator, I mean, not an incubator or a angel, is to guide us on how to actually go about this journey from a concept to a product, and then to, you know, actually get to a market. So I have had experience before of a previous startup, and what we faced a challenge in that was that we were not able to connect the right dots at the right time, and eventually like the team did not stay together and things
Right.
happened. But so why? I mean, our why is, one is we want capital, and the other is we want guidance on how to go about actually taking this from a product stage or a concept stage to a business stage. So
Right.
that's the reason which we look forward to.
Fairly understandable, right? But so to be very honest, like at least the incubators that I know of,
Mm,
and I could be like off here in the sense that the kind of incubators that I've looked at, etc. Like it will be a small subset of the total number of incubators available across the country. So
mm,
obviously, I cannot speak for all incubators in the country, but with my limited experience with incubators and with other people who have incubated at different places, the sense is that incubators don't necessarily support you with capital, or even if they do, they end up taking equity which is equivalent to what like a PIDES would take, or what an IITM research park would take.
mm,
And I'm assuming you don't want to give up those kinds of equities at this stage. So a lot of incubators across India function the same way. So incubators run on two models. One is either equity and the other is rent. And any day I would pick an incubator with rent over an incubator with equity. Like for the obvious reason that you don't want these people on your cap table. Now the next, so about funding, I believe that if you go out and I mean, you're a BITS alum, you're at IIT Madras today, you can easily reach out to some alumni and say that I need this amount of can you angel invest X amount of capital to do this. And I think that's still a better way of accessing capital than through incubators. So if your goal is capital, then perhaps you don't need an incubator. Now, the second thing about going from concept to product, again, a lot of incubator staff are just there, okay? Like they're hired by the incubator to be there. These are not ex founders, these are not ex operators, these are not people who have actually gone in and built stuff. They are staff that are hired to do admin stuff. So the amount of guidance that you would get from them is very limited. So what I would say is maybe like through this Sus Ventures program or otherwise, find out people who you think like first figure out what kind of people can give you guidance, right? Like you'll have some archetype of a person who can give you guidance, right? Like then you say,
Right.
okay, who make a list of these people, reach out to them and say, can we spend a few hours with you? Can we ask a few questions? Would you like to be involved? Can you come and look at our prototype once? Maybe give some feedback. So these could be either like ex-founders who've built in the space or people who are operators in the space, right? So you go to them and say, can we do this? And a lot of times people are very willing to volunteer their time. Like,
Yeah.
so at least initially you can just, maybe meet one for a 1 or 2 hours over a Saturday or Sunday, or like whatever, whenever they are free, right? Get some feedback, and maybe some of these people are also willing to later come in and do some angel investing. So it's more of like being strategic. Now, one place where incubators could be of use is when you're applying to government grants. So your Nidhi Prayas or Startup India Seed Fund, for these things, you might need an incubator. Like they expect you to have to be associated with an incubator. In that, like if you want one of these grants, then you go to an incubator and say, obviously an incubator that takes rent and not an incubator that takes equity, and tell them that this is what this is, we want to do this, we want to apply for these grants. And I mean that should be good enough. So that is the only place where having incubators is useful. And the other thing is space. So if you're out of a college campus and you need 4 people to work together in one space, and you're not able to say find like a good enough space, or like if a 2 BHK costs more than what the incubator space would be, which is the case in a place like Kormangla, right? Like in Bangalore and Kormangla, if I wanted to work out of IKP, like IKP rent is low, but the rent in Kormangla area is very high. So I would still prefer to say stay in a PG in Kormangla and work out of an IKP as opposed to getting a 3 BHK. But in the part of Bangalore that I live in, which is Kodigehalli, here getting a 2 BHK is way cheaper than getting an incubator space. So then
Got
it
it.
becomes a trade-off between which of these things matters.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the insight on incubation. And yeah, I mean, this XYZ thing, we are somewhere around it, but I mean, figuring the consumer is one thing which
I
is
mean, that is very hard. Like I am also still trying to figure that out to a large extent.
yeah,
And everybody keeps talking about how it's really hard to get PMF and all. Like it is a hard thing. Like I don't think it's just you or me. Like a lot of
yeah,
people are struggling with it across the board. So yeah, I mean, it's a hard problem. Like you don't have to
yeah.
beat yourself up on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Yeah, I mean, somebody else can take it up.
Yeah, there's a question on chat. I don't think I fully understand the question, so I'm not going to respond to this because I'm unsure of what I need to say. Uh,
Yeah, hi.
yeah,
Hello. Am I audible?
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Also,
okay,
I'll
yeah.
have to leave around 12:15, so we'll,
Sure. So I'll just keep this very short.
yeah.
So, like the few things just to touch upon, I wanna go into this. So one of the worst thing for us is working probably in a highly regulated environment. Suppose fintech, or maybe for you it may be biotech,
What are
very
you working
mentioned.
on?
So a little background about me. Previously, I worked I previously co-founded QuantBlue, which is a quantitative analysis software for mutual funds, SEBI, which we sold to B2B, which was 4.5 lakh rupees monthly MRR company. But things didn't work out eventually, so I switched to something else. Right now, I'm building EquipSetu, which is a B2B marketplace for equipment procurement. So we help companies procure equipment online,
What kind of
core in
equipment are we talking about?
core industrial equipment. That's why I was asking
Like what?
particularly. Yeah, so we focus right now just in manufacturing, some core manufacturing equipment.
No,
But
can you
we
give me
are
an example of an equipment that would be available on your marketplace?
right now you can find safety equipment, general tools, CNC machines. Recently, we added injection molding machines. So,
Okay, got it.
yeah. But we are trying to focus on four industries: IT, agriculture, IT, manufacturing, construction, and manufacturing. But right now we're just solely focusing on manufacturing, building, going on vertical on that. So, what? So we also I previously faced some regulatory challenges when you need licenses, particularly in fintech. So we got that broker and everything. What challenges did you face in your journey? How did you overcome that? Because those are something very difficult to overcome. That's what I realized it is in my journey. Second is you as you mentioned, you're based out of Bangalore. So for you did you choose to build right now from India, right? At this maybe many of even found VCs that I've talked to, they suggest, and even founders particularly from who are from global corp, say EF India or Antarina, they say go build outside, right? If you particularly for SaaS products, they say a lot, you go build. So why did you choose particularly India and Bangalore particularly? Also, your experience with WTF fund. We are also incubated. I am Bangalore, so NRCL, and we had, if you know Bytes, they are
Yeah,
incubated.
right.
They are,
I just met
yeah.
them recently, yeah.
Oh, I also met them recently on call, so they are part of the cohort with us. So if you can go delve into the journey there with WTF, how was the experience? What are they backing instead of just grants?
Okay, so the
More about
first
that.
question was about regulatory, right?
Regulatory, yeah.
So far we have, so procurement is obviously a
Hmm.
regulated thing, right? So
Yeah.
I need to, so being incubated at CCAMP helps. So all of the vendors for chemicals, etc., they
Hmm.
already have licenses to supply to CCAMP. So the point at which you are a company that's incubated at CCAMP, you don't have to do a lot of regulatory paperwork yourself. So I can just call them up and say we are a company at CCAMP, and they just deliver it directly to CCAMP. That is one. Now, about the other regulatory is around import for things where you cannot find a direct vendor in India, or if the direct vendor in India is supplying it at a significantly higher cost than what the actual cost of the item is, then we import ourselves. And at that time, then you get like a GST and IEC, and sort of go through. So, I mean, if possible, you go through someone like DHL or FedEx, or worst case, you get a customs broker and you just sort of figure that out. So that has been the regulatory bit around it, and also there's no regulation around DNA data storage yet. See, obviously we need a biosafety level 1 lab and all that, but that's very basic, right? That's the kind of undergrad labs that you have
Hmm.
at BITS, etc. Those are BSL 1. So those are so we haven't actually run into a lot of regulatory issues yet. Like, obviously we are not as regulated as fintech. And again, I
Yeah.
don't understand the exact regulations in fintech either. So yeah, I think that is that.
And I think just so you need licenses for everything. So suppose if I'm providing advisory, so our software was advisory software. So we had to remove all of that part where we said we were advisory. So you need to get license for that. So basic stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, fair, understandable.
Yeah.
Uh,
Second question was on why India
why
particularly.
India?
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
Matlab,
Why,
advantages
why?
like
See, I mean, I am an Indian citizen. India is the only
right.
country where I can like build freely. Like,
I agree.
that's why India. We might
No.
consider moving outside later if we want to feel the need to. Uh, and I mean, to be fair, we are a Delaware C Corp with an Indian.
Yeah, because I saw Biocompute Inc. So I was like, you must be incubated
I mean, we
Delaware.
are a
So
Delaware C Corp at the end of the
yeah.
day. So we always have our foot in the US. Uh, and uh, So yeah, but also see cost, like in terms of your operational costs, right? If you just take your entire team to the US, you will have to pay them salaries, you have to pay them living, like the living expenses significantly higher. So at this stage, we cannot afford something like that. And we want whatever money that we have, like whatever capital we've raised, we want to put most of that into R&D expenses as opposed to human resource expenses. So, and that's where building out of India makes a lot of sense. And why build in Bangalore? So the reason for picking, I mean, apart from the fact that Bangalore has like a fairly vibrant startup scene and all that, uh, the incubator that we wanted to work out of was in Bangalore. If I had opted into an incubator in Hyderabad, I would have moved to Hyderabad. So the preference was more for like a good, like one, a good startup ecosystem, but two, also a good biotech ecosystem. And Bangalore has one of the best biotech ecosystems in India. So obviously we don't position ourselves as a fully biotech company, because then people go ahead and assume that we are a diagnostics or a therapeutics company, which is a big headache. But beyond that, I just mean to say, just people in general who can help out with bio things exist in Bangalore a lot more than in other cities. So I think that was the reason for doing that. Also, I love the city. Most of my friends live here. Like, I mean, that was a
Yeah.
secondary reason. But like, if there was a similar city with the same set of access to resources, I would have still picked Bangalore, because at the end of the day, like, I also want to be around people I care about. Uh, so then about WTF, so again, they're a fairly new program. Like, and I was a part of the first, where their very first cohort, and they were very honest about the fact that they were also figuring out a lot of stuff.
Right.
So the grant was the big value add. But beyond that, they have access. They were able to unlock a lot of network, like in terms of say, so they're very open about the fact that they can't help at a technical level, which is understandable. Like, but they can help you access, like, companies, like, heads of companies that you want to speak to, people who are like people who can help you help advise you on the non-tech aspects of things. Uh, uh, yeah, non. So they're very, and they're also very like helpful as sounding boards. So they actually get on calls with you. You're like, yeah, I'm thinking of this. I'm thinking of this. What do you think? I'm planning this. So I think very supportive as an ecosystem, definitely. But a lot of the tech you have to figure out yourself. They're more on the like operational slash
Yeah,
business front. Yeah.
got it. Um, Amazing thing. I'm actually coming to Bangalore next month on 24th and 25th of March. If you would be available and if you will be free and if you're in Bangalore, I'd love to meet you in person, basically any time that works out for you. I'll shoot you over mail maybe if you would be there.
Yeah, you can just reach out on LinkedIn. I think that'd be better.
Perfect. Perfect. I'll do that.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to meet and chat with you.
Yeah.
I think we had a fantastic session. Thanks, Anagha. I think you needed to leave at 12:15, but Ahmad has a question which
I'm
I'm
not
trying to
sure I
read.
understand this question. That's why I didn't respond to it.
Okay, so there's two parts of the question. One is that what do you do for like self-reflection, I guess, and just like, sometimes founders do yoga, meditation. What is it that you do to preserve your mental peace? And the second question is, do you have like founder collaboration events? So maybe you can like very quickly speak about the biotech community that you're trying to build with like-minded people.
Yeah, sure. So I'm still trying to figure out how to like so obviously I go to therapy. Like I think that helps a lot. I would recommend that in my opinion, everyone should go to therapy regardless of whether you're a founder or not. But I think founders, like, for more than one reason, need therapy more than others. So like, please go to therapy is my recommendation in life. No, I mean, honestly, it's been very helpful, like as a tool for self-reflection and more of to deal with a lot of things, right? Like, So I think that is definitely there. Then I enjoy reading. I spend some time reading and reading outside work, right? Like obviously work is also a lot of reading, but I mean to say actually step out and read some good literature. Maybe go for a play or two sometimes, spend some time with friends. Obviously, the amount of time that you have to do a lot of these things is kind of limited, but sometimes you do, push some boundaries, break some of your own rules, and like show up for some of these things. And I think that's been valuable. But while I'm saying this, I'm also still trying to figure out what are the best ways for me to like maintain my physical and mental health. And I think that's going to be work in progress across the board. And secondly, about founder events, meetups. So Bangalore keeps having a lot of these. Uh, like at this point, I've lost track of the kind of stuff that exists because there's so much happening in Bangalore and so much happening across sectors, across the board. Uh, and as you pointed out, there are a bunch of things like Jagriti and Draper and all of that. And yeah, I mean, I'm trying to build out a biotech community for young founders, and that's largely because I couldn't. So a lot of the biotech groups that I joined initially, like the most founders in those groups were at least 40 years old, and obviously then their contexts are very different, their backgrounds are very different. Obviously their knowledge is very meaningful, but it just didn't. But I just didn't feel like I fit in there to some extent, and I wanted to find younger people, figure out how they're solving a lot of problems. So that's how the community started. It was just few of us just got together and said, yeah, we should probably create a WhatsApp group. And then we said, yeah, we should probably also invite more people from outside our 5-6 member group to join us, and we can ask questions and so on. So yeah, just having communities in general is also very helpful to maintain your peace of mind. If that's that also, because when you have people who sort of understand it, because as much as your friends or family want to support or help, right? Like there's a context mismatch in a lot of cases. There's some things that you're stressing about, worrying about, which people who are not founders often don't understand. And this is not a criticism, right? This is just a context difference. This is just like, if you are someone who's a software developer at a big corporation, it's hard for you to understand what it's like to have to set up your own IT infrastructure in your own office. So and this is not to blame them, right? Maybe you also don't know a lot of things that happen in bigger companies. Like, there'll be a lot of office politics there, there'll be a lot of other nonsense happening there, which you have no context for it. And if they are ranting to you about it, you will also be like, yeah, I have no context for this. So I think there's a context mismatch with people who are not founders. So having communities of founders is very helpful, especially to brainstorm a bunch of things, to like troubleshoot things, and maybe these are things that other people have already done, so you can learn from them, adapt a bunch of these things. Yeah, and if you sort of go around and look up LinkedIn, follow a few founders or like incubators or like a few communities of founders, you should be able to find events that you can go to. And obviously initially you go to all sorts of events, then you start realizing which events are a better fit for you and what you're building and the kind of people you want to meet. So then you start filtering out based on that. um, yeah, I think that is the answer to that question. Uh, yeah, I think Garv, we'll take this offline. Yeah, cool. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for your time, Anagha, and thanks for the lovely question, everyone. So I think it was very helpful today. So hopefully we'll see you soon at Suscrunch. And before that, I think if anyone has any questions, like Anagha said, you can reach out to her on LinkedIn.
Yeah, please. And also, like, I might take some time to respond, but I will respond. And that's just because I still need to learn how to manage my time and not because your questions are invaluable. So yeah. Cool.
Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. Have a lovely weekend. All the best for your exams for the Bits Pilani students. See you soon. Bye-bye.